All right, hey guys, welcome to Keto's Corner. We have a special guest joining the show today. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience out there.
Hello, everyone. I'm presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party, Austin Petersen.
So, Austin, we've had a couple debates now with Republican candidates and Democratic candidates. Obviously, the Republican candidates are probably the more entertaining ones to watch. What have you seen from those two debates, and what would you say makes you stand out coming from the Libertarian Party?
It's a great question. I mean, the real question is what is the ideology of the difference in ideology between all of the major party candidates? For example, if you take a look at the policies of Donald Trump versus, say, Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton, you're pretty much guaranteed to get a progressive in either party. And that's really interesting because if you think about what does it mean to be a progressive, Donald Trump pushes for a graduated progressive income tax, the same as Bernie Sanders. The difference really is just what the rates are going to be. Maybe Bernie Sanders would be 90% and perhaps Donald Trump would be 85. So the question is that what do these major candidates believe? Well, the difference between them and myself is that they are progressive authoritarians. And I am a classical liberal in the style of our third president, Thomas Jefferson. I'm a free market libertarian, laissez-faire, classical liberalism in the style of many of our founding fathers. So it's really the election. The election comes down to authoritarianism versus libertarianism, which I represent.
And what would you say has been the hardest part running as a third-party candidate, even like within your own party? Has that been a struggle for you at all?
Yeah, the problem is not so much what the general public likes, because generally when I go out and I meet normal people who are perhaps not as political, then they're very interested and excited to hear new ideas from a young professional, someone who comes from the Midwest, who has sort of kind of a down-home regular personality. But the real problem is within our own ranks. And I think that a lot of it has to do with the natural instincts that humans have, which is, my mother likes to call it, she used to call it the crabs in a bucket theory. If someone tries to better themselves or bring themselves up, then there will be a crab there, of course, to pull you down. And to quote Taylor Swift, she says that people throw rocks at things that are shiny. Of course. There's a strain of egalitarianism that runs throughout the liberty movement. Which I reject. And as the liberty movement rejected Ayn Rand, so we have rejected the idea of individual greatness. There's this idea that oh, this person has a big ego. How dare this person must be a narcissist? Well, how dare this person have self-love? How dare this person believe in their own greatness? Well, how could you possibly achieve greatness unless you believe in it for yourself? Yes, there is a line that you have to walk. But I think that there's a problem that we have, that there is an egalitarian streak in the liberty movement. And I just have to say, free people are not equal, and equal people are not free. And so if you think you can do better, why don't you join the LP race and beat me?
Well said. Thanks for answering that. Now towards your stances on some of the hotter issues facing the country, what would you say the three major issues are facing America right now? And what would you do as president to address those?
The three major issues, I would probably say, number one, the national debt. Number two, I would say our monetary policy. And number three, I would say our foreign policy. I like to make this nerdy joke whenever I'm with my economist friends that there's the difference between monetary policy and fiscal policy. Monetary policy is where money is created, and fiscal policy is where it's destroyed. Because, of course, fiscal policy is about taxes and spending, right? And monetary policy is about how money is created and how it enters the marketplace. And we've seen problems in the marketplace recently, not all of them caused by monetary policy, much of them caused by instability in the energy sectors that is a direct result of the foreign policy of the country of Saudi Arabia, which is attempting to destabilize our domestic energy production, which is something that we have to be careful of and something we have to look out for. And another big problem that we have, of course, is the threat of terrorism and ISIS. These are real threats. These are not just the type of threats that if you ignore them, they go away. These are the kinds of problems that libertarians need to be able to propose real foreign policy solutions for, and you can't simply apply say that a set of philosophical principles applied consistently will solve the problems of international terrorism. No, I think unfortunately the world itself is inconsistent. And so we're going to have to look at the types of approaches, the real world approaches that we can use to fight terrorism that will also protect our constitutional rights. And that's really where I think the argument comes down to. Almost all of the major candidates, save perhaps Rand Paul and sometimes Ted Cruz, agree that warrantless wiretapping and spying on American citizens is perfectly fine in defense of our safety. And of course, those who give up temporary liberty for safety deserve neither, Benjamin Franklin said. I think it's possible to defend ourselves from international terrorism without sacrificing our core principles of liberty, our Fourth Amendment rights. And if I were president of the United States, I would demand that any institution which falls under my purview, which would include the NSA being a military institution, if I were the commander-in-chief, I would demand that there be new guidelines so that this institution operates strictly within constitutional guidelines. And these are important conversations for us to have, because I think the libertarian movement has the depth of knowledge is about as thin as a kiddie pool, and perhaps how we're going to have to fight to regain our privacy here, because the real issue lies with the policy of corporate personhood. With corporate personhood, the federal government can subpoena Verizon Wireless or Sprint and have it basically be effectively a blanket warrant. And that's really what the Founding Fathers, one of the major reasons why the Founding Fathers fought the American Revolution, was to stop blanket warrants. But if we have corporate personhood, which libertarians might say is a good thing to protect free markets and free enterprise, has been a kind of a stopgap measure for us to have the ability to do business and transact, then we're going to have to discuss what that means for our privacy. Because if a corporation is a person, and many Austrian economists, people like Steve Horowitz, argue that corporate personhood is a good thing for our economy, then what that means also is that then if you have data at Sprint or Verizon Wireless, then all the government has to do is subpoena Verizon or Sprint, and since it's a person, then they have access to all our data, of course, because a text message, for example, if it exists on Sprint servers, then it's Sprint's property, not your property. So we have to look at the 21st century technology and craft new libertarian policies that will protect our Fourth Amendment rights. And these are the conversations that we're not having right now, because unfortunately, I think, again, we have a surface level understanding of it, and we're not willing to wade too deep in the mire of policy because it might look too much like governance. And boy, that scares the hell out of a libertarian when you start talking about doing that.
Real quick on the Second Amendment. Obviously, the attacks in Paris and San Bernardino made people really concerned about where the next attack was going to take place, either from ISIS itself or from homegrown people that were ISIS inspired. To people that say that the Second Amendment wouldn't have stopped those kinds of attacks, what do you say to people on that side of the fence?
Well, it's not proper for a politician to say that he can't protect you all of the time. Perhaps if I were going to be a good politician like Donald Trump or Bernie Sanders, I would tell you that the government would keep us safe all the time, 100%. But the reality is that you have a higher likelihood of drowning in your bathtub than being killed in a terrorist attack. You have a higher, chance of contracting rabies and dying from a rat bite in a New York City subway than you do of dying in a terrorist attack in a New York City subway. So I would love to be able to have a conversation with the American people about what are the real threats that we face. And if you've ever been in a hospital or any nurses or doctors, they all are familiar with the concept of triage. Do we know what triage is? Triage, for your audience, if they don't know, triage is taking a list of problems, of maladies, and ranking them in order of their how problematic they are. So if you're bleeding from your jugular versus if you have a broken arm, you have to stop the bleeding in the jugular before you have a broken arm. So in terms of dealing with the threats of terrorism, you have to look at it from an issue of triage. From the top down, what is the problem that we have? I do agree with Republicans that our weak president, such as we have right now, does invite attacks, because to predators, weakness is a provocation. When I was a younger boy, before I learned martial arts and before I learned the concepts of self-defense, I was a little shy, perhaps, and I would get picked on, and I didn't realize that my shyness and my displays of weakness were seen as a provocation. Because bullies and predators who exist, humans being apex predators that we are going to look at the leadership and they're going to say, is this weak? Well, then we're going to take it over. And again, another reason why, the controversy of the non-aggression principle arises, because I take the principles of the world such as they exist and then apply the libertarian philosophy to them, rather than trying to say the world should adhere to libertarian philosophy and then everything else will fall in line. Right. And so I think it's important for us to understand that when dealing with threats of terrorism, for example. We need to have strong leadership, number one, because there was a reason why Ronald Reagan got the hostages returned to him immediately, because he was respected. Okay, because they knew that he meant what he said, because he had huge cojones. He had what Judge Napolitano likes to call testicular fortitude, and we don't have that in our president. And that's actually why people look up to Donald Trump. Donald Trump being, he's politically incorrect. He's also politically incorrect about his policies are also incorrect, but he has the right attitude. He has the commander-in-chief attitude. Americans respect that, and so do people around the world. And if libertarians can't come up with candidates who can mimic the tactics of our enemies, not their policies, but their tactics. And I think too often libertarians get confused when they see someone emulating the tactics of the neocons or the tactics of the social democrats. They go, well, he's a statist neocon. No, I'm simply arguing that we adopt the tactics and the rhetoric of our enemies, not their actual belief systems. Then we won't be able to implement our libertarian policies. So you have to understand the difference between tactics and policy. We have to have strong leadership, and then we have to start looking at where can we apply libertarian policies in terms of a war with ISIS or a national defense. And I think that, again, that comes from a realist viewpoint. And again, perhaps only Rand Paul, other than myself, proposes this type of a national foreign policy.
So how would you deal with countries like Iran, who President Obama made a nuclear agreement with, who is a known state sponsor of terrorism? How would you deal with countries like that that don't like America, that want to see our enemies fall and have bad intentions? How would you go about?
It's a great question, and it's actually why I'll bring up one of my opponents right now for the Libertarian nomination. John McAfee has excellent ideas regarding cybersecurity. He's wrong about almost everything else, but cybersecurity, yeah, he's one of those who will build the roads types. You know what I mean? He came around to the Libertarian Party recently because we have ballot access, and he doesn't want to spend his own millions trying to get on the ballot. So, but he's like, we need national infrastructure projects. We need to put people to work. I'm like, don't you understand that the basis of libertarian ideology is that the government can't create jobs, and that everything we hate and despise are people who say who will build the roads? But anyways, he's getting a lot of attention for the race, so I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity with Iran. We do need offensive cyber capabilities because they have offensive cyber capabilities. We should not hammer our swords into plowshares while our enemy does the opposite. It's important for us to have the type of military technology, cyber military technology, that will enable us to pose a credible threat to their installations that would pose a credible threat to ours. And so when it comes to Iran, I think that you do need a sticks and carrots approach. And that means that we should have overtures to Iran about free trade. We should be talking about opening up our markets so that we can expose them to the benefits of laissez-faire. And if we want a revolution in Iran, if we want the theocratic authoritarian dictatorship to fall, then we should encourage that by offering their citizens and their people the benefits of Western capitalism. And I think that that's really the first step, because again, if we just go in and we depose the Ayatollahs, then something just as evil that exists there will take its place. A cultural revolution must arise first, a classical liberal revolution, just like the United States. The United States was primed for a classical liberal revolution at the time. And the founders knew this. If you've read Thomas Paine or any of them, until you see the seeds of that in Iran, you will not have a peaceful relationship with their government until you have sown the seeds of classical liberalism in their nation. So it has to be a joint approach. You need to have the types of capabilities so that you can defend yourselves against those types of hostile regimes, but you also need to be prepared to offer them the olive branch. And again, this is why the seal of the United States has the eagle carrying the swords, or carrying the arrows and the olive branch. And always lead with the olive branch, but you must be prepared with the sword in case someone has ill intentions. That's just a reality that we have to deal with.
Good answer. And one last thing on the terrorism idea is President Obama did make a prisoner swap for Sergeant Bergdahl, and it seemed to betray the American value that you don't negotiate with terrorists under any circumstances. Did you ever see at any point that move justified? And as president, do you see there ever being maybe a need or a circumstance to ever negotiate with terrorists whatsoever?
I don't know, honestly. Can I be an honest citizen and
Yes,
say that I
yes,
don't know? And I actually don't despise people who prognosticate and say, "Oh, well, I will never do this or I will never do that." And in reality, the president of the United States is not a libertarian job. I would be required to uphold an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that includes things like the 16th and 17th Amendment. Even though I don't agree with those things, I'm required to uphold the law. And so when it comes to dealing with these kinds of situations, I can't say exactly what I would do. This is why you have to try and elect the best person that you can, that you could trust to deal with the situations as they might arrive. And those situations, even if Rand Paul were elected, which perhaps maybe he has a better chance than me, maybe not. But if he were elected, then he's not going to make perfect decisions. He's a human being, and we place too much power, I think, on the president and what they think they can do versus the powers that they actually have. And when it comes to dealing with terrorists, you have to look at that piecemeal. There isn't a consistent philosophical approach that you can apply as a one-size-fits-all policy to every single opportunity or every single problem that the United States faces. So that's why you have to pick the best commander-in-chief that you can to hope that they make the right decisions and understand that they will make mistakes and there will be problems, but that you hope that at a minimum they can provide what Ronald Reagan provided, which was hope to the American people, a love for the United States and their people, and a representation of free market capitalism, at least a representation of it, if not an actual deployment of it, which Ronald Reagan, of course, saw towards the end of his term. He went from laissez-faire to down towards the end towards neoconservatism. But that's reality, and that's what we have to face as libertarians. So again, I can't say for certain 100%. Will I negotiate with terrorists? Will I not? Well, if I say something to you now, and in 3 years I'm sitting in the office and I have the chance to save American lives, would I take it? I don't know. Possibly, maybe I should, but I can't say right now.
And another thing, in just regards to what Trump has said, and probably been the loudest voice in the room on this issue with immigration. Last major question for you: how would you handle the illegal immigration situation? And what are your thoughts on what Trump has said so far in his campaign about it?
And well, I'm against the intervention of the government into the free market, and a free market in labor is just as effective as a free market in commodities. The government has no business telling employers who they cannot hire. That to me strikes at the heart of the philosophy of libertarianism and of laissez-faire. And to me, it shows the authoritarianism of the right, that they wish to limit immigration to these shores and to restrict immigration specifically to Muslims and people coming from Muslim countries. That to me is what really it sends a chill up my spine. I am no friend to radical Islam. As a classical liberal, I speak out against radical Islam frequently, and I get painted as an Islamophobe. Well, I might be a little bit afraid of Islam simply because I don't want to be blown up. That's a reality that we face with, right? And as a classical liberal, I reject radical Islam, but that does not mean that I will apply policies to specific religions, to be handled separately, as if that would stop the flow of terrorism, or as if that wouldn't inflame further the hatred and enmity at the United States of people from Muslim countries. There really does have to be at some point a moral high ground that you take, which is that sometimes that you hold yourself above those that you detest, meaning that, yes, sometimes tactically, strategically, you must adopt the tactics of your enemies. That means that you have to fight, brutal, or you have to fight cold or dirty. But in terms of something like perhaps the death penalty, if you capture soldiers on a battlefield, you don't execute them. They're prisoners of war and they go to jail. And so we need to look at opportunities for us to give ourselves the moral high ground over our enemies. We're not going to go out and start suicide bombing mosques. So why are we talking about forcing Muslims to wear a crescent moon like they did the Jews in Germany? Again, there has to be a moral high ground held by those who wish to proclaim that their civilization is superior. You cannot claim American exceptionalism and argue for these types of policies. Because again, there's nothing exceptional about a country that would do something that would be so hatred and so bigoted. And as President of the United States, I would oppose such policies.
Thanks for the answers. How can people check out your campaign status, maybe look at your platform more on a website, or how can they get involved?
Well, Friends of Liberty, our fellow revolutionary patriots, should go to austinpetersen2016.com. Take a look at my platform. If you could send us a donation, I'd be very grateful. I'm going to be traveling around the country starting at the end of February. If you go to my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/producer Petersen, my event schedule is on the public page there. You can RSVP to a local event, come out and support us, hang out a sign that says AP for LP, and help us win the nomination so that we can carry the torch of liberty for future generations.
Thanks for joining, Austin.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.